Maseches Bava Kamma Daf Lamed. The test begins with the Mishnah, which introduces the topic of the shor, the property of a cheresh shaita v'katan, people who are not considered to be mentally competent and therefore not fully responsible. Lumar will discuss to what extent do we hold them responsible and to what extent do we appoint someone to care for their estate and to therefore guard their property. So the Mishnah begins by saying that if a healthy person's ox gores that of a cheresh shaita or katan, he is chayev as normal. However, if the ox of a cheresh shaita or katan, and again, cheresh is a person who is a deaf mute who's considered to have never learned anything, is therefore not functional. Shaita is a person who is not mentally competent, and katan is a child. So an ox of any of these three that gores the ox of a healthy adult is pater. There is no chiyuv. Now, the Mishnah then proceeds right away to apparently contradict this by saying that what we do to arraign that shar is we appoint an apotropos, we appoint a guardian who will be responsible for the property of the cheresh shaita v'katan, and the witnesses come and testify in front of the court to the guardian to say that this ox has gored. Now, this seems to be strange because if we just said that he's pater, what's the testimonial about? So the Gemara asks the kasha. We haven't finished the Mishnah yet, but let's just see. The Gemara asks the kasha. The Gemara answers that you need to make him into a muad. You can't be mechayev the cheresh shaita v'katan to pay anything migufoi because the cheresh shaita v'katan you can only collect from their karka, from their land. So therefore, from their metatlin, which includes the shar, you can't collect from. However, you do want the shar to be able to start counting the amount of gores that he did until you get to 3, and then it'll become a muad, and then you can pay min aliyah from the rest of the property, and then you could pay from the land of the cheresh shaita v'katan, or yisaimim if that's what they were. And therefore, you have to testify that each attack happened, and that's what the Mishnah is referring to here. Now, back to the Mishnah, the Gemara says, what happens if they then leave the state of cheresh shaita v'katan? So the cheresh becomes able to hear and speak and becomes able to learn, the shaita becomes functional, and the child grows up. So now, what is the halacha? So the Bava Kamma says the ox who was, even if he became a muad, goes back to being a tam. Rabbi Meir holds that way. Rabbi Yossi says he stays b'cheskas muad. It doesn't go back to being a tam. This machlokes is over when you have a change of reshus. What is the status of the ox? Now, last line in the Mishnah discusses a shar ha'itz tadin, that is an ox that is a rodeo ox, as it were. It's used in sporting events to attempt to attack humans, and they try to defend themselves from it. And it's trained to be vicious and to attack. So anything that it does, it's pater for. If it kills someone, it is not chayiv misa for that, because the Torah says ki yigach, if the ox will gore from his own volition, and not that someone will train him to become an attack ox. Okay, we've already seen the beginning of the Gemara that explains the Mishnah. So now, as we move on, the Gemara asks, when the shar becomes a muad, now you pay min aliyah. That means you're going to collect from the rest of the property. Whose property? Who is responsible to pay for this? Is it the yisaimim, if they were ketanim, and the cheresh and the shaita, or is it the apotropos? Because the apotropos is the one who's responsible to guard it and to watch it. Who's the one who needs to pay the money? So the Gemara quotes a machlekes amarim. Rebbe says it's from the property of the yisaimim, from the ketanim and the other ones, and Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says it's from the property of the apotropos. So more questions is, could Rav Yechon really say that you could collect from Yisaimim? We have a maimer of Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav Asi that says you cannot collect from Yisaimim for any reason other than the fact that it's going to cause them a greater loss. The only way you could collect money that is owed by Yisaimim is to prevent it from having a further loss, such as if they're paying interest to a guy. Now, Rabbi Yechonan adds, if they're paying interest to a guy, or if it's a ksubas isha, that is a ksuba of their father's wife, and their estate is paying her support until she receives the ksuba. So the money's being burned up. It's better to just give her the ksuba so that they could stop having to pay the support that they're going to have to pay until she receives the ksuba. So what you see from here is that Rabbi Yechon clearly says that you don't collect from Yisaimim for any reason. So how here is he saying that you can collect from Yisaimim to pay the damages? So Gemara first says, okay, so switch the opinions. Rabbi Yechonan is the one who says that it comes from the apotropos, and Rabbi Bar Chanina is the one who says that it comes from the Yisaimim. So Rava says, I don't understand you. You're going to switch the pshat and make Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina saying something that doesn't make sense. That's you collect from the Yisayimim just because you have a contradiction in Rabbi Yechanan. Why is Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina responsible for the stira in Rabbi Yechanan's words? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina can't say that it's from the Yisayimim. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina was a dayan, he was a judge, and he goes to the depths of the halacha, says Rava. He would never say that you collect from the Yisayimim. So the Gemara therefore needs to give a different answer. The Gemara says, okay, so really it was Rabbi Yechanan who said you collect from the Yisayimim, not Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. And even though normally he says you never collect from Yisayimim, unless of course it's causing them a loss, you could collect from Yisayimim, and there's a particular reason for it. And that's because if you were to collect from the apotropousin, you wouldn't have apotropousin. No one would want to take the job. Why would they want to put their property at risk? What do they stand to gain from it? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, no, you can collect from the apotropous, and the apotropous is ultimately going to regain the money. That is, when the kitanim, the Yisayimim, will grow up, they'll be able to take them to court and get that money restored to them. But the responsibility is really the apotropous because they're the one who are responsible to watch it. Okay, now our Mishnah had said that you set up apotropousin to make them not to be able to make the shar into a muad. We had said that you don't collect the Chati Nezik the first 3 times because you don't collect Migufay. The Gemara now wants to say there's a Machek Tanaim about that. The Gemara is going to take a brisa which seems to be discussing whether you can make the ox into a muad, and the Gemara will show that the real pshat is that they're discussing whether you have to pay the payment of tam keren tam migufay or not. So what does the brisa say? So it says that if you have a shar of a cheresh, if you have a shar that its owner became a cheresh, or became a shaita, or that the owner went to Medinas Hayam. So what do you do with this? So Rabbi Yossi ben Nekusa says in the name of Sumchis, it stays a tam, unless you make it a mood, you testify in front of his actual owner. And you can't testify in front of the owner, either because it's a cheresh or shaita or a Medinas Hayam. And therefore, in the current situation, the implication of what Rabbi Yossi, of what Sumchis seems to be saying, is that you cannot make this animal into a tam, into a muad at all. It'll stay a tam. Now the Chachamim disagree, and the Chacham say, like we saw in our Mishnah, you appoint an apotropos and you testify in front of the apotropos. Okay, now the Mishnah here, the Bryce here, it continues, and this is what happens if the cheresh gets healed, the shaita returns to functionality, the child grows up, or the owner comes from Medinas Hayam. We hadn't mentioned a child before, but here it is mentioned. So what do you do then? So here the same 2 opinions continue. Yehuda ben Nekusa says in the name of Sumchas, it goes back to becoming a tam now, until you testify again in front of the owners that it did another 3 negichas 3 times, but the previous state of muad ends. The Gemara is going to ask the Avi's Kasha, well, you just told me that it can't become a muad. But first let's see the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. He says that it stays in its chazaka. If it was a muad before, it stays a muad up till now. Okay, so now the Gemara asks the Kasha. What is Sumchis up to now told me? In the first half of the brisa, Sumchis said it can't become a mood. In the second half, he says, and it doesn't stay a mood, it goes back to being a tam. How did it become a mood in the first place that you're discussing whether or not it'll stay a mood? Obviously, when Sumchis said before that you have to say Edus in front of the owners and they're not here, he wasn't talking about them being a mood. Sumchis agrees that they could become a mood, just like our Mishnah says, and just like the second opinion says. Sumchis was saying that you can't be made to collect from it the tamus payment. That's what he was saying. You can't testify in front of it unless the owners are here. And the other Ashita who's arguing on him must say that you could. So here you see a Machlekes Tanaim over whether you can collect a keren tam payment from an ox whose owners aren't functional or aren't around. The Gemara asks, what is the Machlekes about when we are asking, could they stay a muad or go back to being a tam as soon as the owner comes home? So the Gemara says it's the concept of reshus mishana. If you change ownership, does that change the halachas? Here it says if you're changing ownership, it's going from the apotropos back to the rightful owner. And if you hold reshus mishana, it'll change its chazaka, it'll go back to being a tam. Okay, the Gemara now brings another brisa. The brisa quotes from Rav Yaakov as to what happens with the shar of a cheresh shaita v'katan, that's negech. So first, the brisa says Rav Yaakov pays chatzin nezek. The Gemara says not that Rav Yaakov himself pays chatzin nezek, but it means Rav Yaakov holds that you have to pay chatzin nezek. The Gemara has a kasha. Why does the brisa say Rav Yaakov holds you have to pay chatzin nezek? What's the point in specifying half the nezek. If it's talking about a short tam, you should just say Rav Yaakov holds you chayiv, and then I would understand chayiv means chatzi nezek, just like anyone else who's chayiv for a keren tam. And if it's talking about a muad, then where does the din of chatzi nezek come from? A muad, if you watched it as much as you can so that you're an oinus, you locked it up really good, so then you don't have to pay anything. And if you didn't watch it the way you're supposed to, then you have to pay nezek shalim. So where does this din of chatzi nezek come from? Are we referring to a tam, referring to a muad? What's going on? So Gemara answers, we're referring to a muad. And Rabbi Yaakov holds like two opinions of Rabbi Yehuda, one opinion of the Rabbanan. He holds that a tam who becomes a muad is paying half tamas and half muad. That the muad adds on a 50% payment, but the first 50% still has the halachas of tamas. Now, that's one opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. He also holds that muad is enough to have shmira pechusa. The Torah says v'lo yishmernu balav, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that shows if you do any shmira at all, even a minor shmira, it's enough for a muad. A tam doesn't have that halacha. Therefore, if he did, we're referring to where he did a shmira pechusa. Therefore, he's putter from his muad aspect. However, he has a tam aspect, and he's chayav for that. Those are the two opinions of Rabbi Yehuda that he holds of, and that's why it's chatzi nezek. The only thing you have to add is that he holds like the Rabbanan over Somchus that you do pay keren tam even on the shar of a charashayta v'kata. Okay, so we said that the pshat here is that Rabbi Yaakov here holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So Abaye asks, Rabbi Yaakov argues on Rabbi Yehuda, and he quotes a brisa that says a shar of a charashayta v'kata and that gores. Rabbi Yehuda's mechayiv, and Rabbi Yaakov says chatzi nezek. Sounds like a machlekes. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Bar Ula says it's not a machlekes. Yehuda says chayiv, he doesn't say how much, and Rabbi Yaakov explains chatzi nezek according to all the opinions we said before. So Mara asks, okay, that makes sense, but how did Abaye learn it? What was the case of this machlekes? If we're talking about a tam, then Rabbi Yehuda couldn't have said nezek shalim because, like we said, because we know that a tam is only chatzi nezek altogether. If we're talking about a muad that did a shmir pechusa, Rabbi Yehuda should again say that you're pater on the tzad muad and you're chayiv only chatzi nezek and not more. And if you didn't do any shmir at all, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda is saying you pay nezek shalim, why would Rabbi Yaakov say you pay only chatzi nezek? What? How does Abaye learn this machlekes? What's the case and what are they arguing over? So the Gemara answers Abaye wanted to learn that the cases where there was no shmir at all. Now, Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that when there's a muad and you need to pay, you're paying half tamas and half muadas. Now the machlekes though is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that you could pay tamas even to a charashayt v'kata, and therefore you have to pay nezek shalim. When he said chayiv, he meant nezek shalim. You pay the tzad tamas, you pay the tzad muad. And that Rabbi Yaakov disagrees, and he holds you don't pay tamas to a charashayt v'kata, and therefore the tzad tamas is potter here, and you're paying only the tzad muad. The Gemara now asks, why do we need the two brises of Rav Yaakov? We had the brise before where Rav Yaakov says you pay chatzi nezek, and we're trying to figure out what it was about. And now we have a brise here where Rav Yaakov is either arguing on Rabbi Yehuda or agreeing with Rabbi Yehuda on Machlekes Abaye in Rava how you learn it. So how did these two work together? So the Gemara says, according to Abaye, that this brisa, the second brisa, Rabbi Yaakov is arguing on Rabbi Yehuda, and he's teaching me that he holds that you do not collect from Yisaimim the tzad tamus. So then the first brisa makes a lot of sense. It'll be talking about a muad. You didn't do any shmira at all. You should therefore pay nezek shalim, but you can't collect tzad tamus from Yisaimim. And therefore Rav Yaakov is saying a chiddush, you only collect tzad muadas. So we're talking about a muad with no shmira at all, and that brisa I can understand. But if you're holding like Rava, and Rava holds that Rav Yaakov and Rav Yehuda are not arguing, and Rav Yaakov agrees that you do collect apotropos, you set up an apotropos and you collect tzad tamus from Yisaimim. So the previous brisa, why do we want to say that it was referring to a muad? Say that it's referring to a tam, and you collect tzad tamus like normal. Now, there's a machlekes how much of a shmira you're chayiv to do on a muad. So whichever opinion you want to hold, like if Rav Yaakov holds that you have to do a full shmir, it's talking about we did a shmir b'chusa. If he holds that you have to do only shmir b'chusa, it's talking about we did no shmir at all. Okay, whatever works. But either way, Let him be teaching me that you pay tzad tamas. It's a tam. You pay tzad tamas, and that's why it's a chiddush that he said chatzin. He couldn't just say chayev. He's coming to teach you. You pay only tzad tamas, and not a greater chiyuv, not the entire chiyuv of the muad. Gemara answers, Rav wanted to set up this way because it's teaching me two halachos. It's teaching me that Rav Yaakov holds like Rav Yehuda, that holds that you only need a shmir pechusa for a muad, and therefore, if he did a shmir pechusa, that's enough, and he's pater for that. It's also teaching me that a muad has two halves. It has a tzad tamus and a tzad muados, and the tzad muados is enough for shmir pechusa, but the tzad tamus is not. And therefore, you have to pay for that because he's teaching me the chiddush that you do collect tzad tamus from an apotropis for a owner who's in absentia. Now, the Gemara gives one more pshat in how Abai would learn the machlekes between Behida and Rabbi Yaakov, that they're talking about where the owner came back or became healthy, or the katan grew up, and they're arguing about Rishus Mashana. Do you go back to being Nezek Sholem? Do you go back to being Chatzi Nezek? Do you remain a muad who pays Nezek Sholem?